Hi all, this is Molly. I'm going to experiment and start working on family history using PowerPoint and then talking behind some of the photos and some of the family information. I'm starting with the Hameses, but I believe this is going to be a lot more than one PowerPoint. So the Hameses, actually our family, that our direct line, they actually came from England to Virginia, and then our line went to South Carolina and then to Florida. The first known one that we have proof of that he is in our lineage is Randolph, and he actually came from England in the 1600s and was in Virginia. He is in the planter. There's a book called The Planters of Virginia, I believe the name of it, and he is listed in there as one of the planters, one of the original planters in Virginia. So we're talking 1600s, which is the same time that the Merrills actually came. And I have a copy of the crest here. There are other versions of it, but that's the copy that I like that one the best. Randolph's son that is our lineage is William. I believe he had a daughter also, but William was our lineage, and he lived there, and he is found in the colonial records of Virginia. So he was owning property and lived there, and there are some records, not much. That time frame is hard to find a lot of information. His son William Jr. also was born there, and he moved. He's the first one to move after when they got to that Rappahannock or whatever the name of that was in Virginia. Forgive my pronunciation there. He is the first one to move from there. Now he married a William Fan, which is really Winifred Fan, which is interesting. When I started tracing her information, I believe that she's German in the background. So we do have some German blood. I've not been able to trace too far back, but it's interesting. And then they have several children, and they moved to Amelia, Virginia. Now Charles is the one who broke off from Virginia and moved. And this is this is the one that when I found him, he solved a lot of problems that I was having when I first started searching for the Hameses, because I thought, and this is where we get in trouble when we think, I thought that our branch, the Hameses that were in South Carolina, were in Cherokee County with the Gaffneys because they intermarried there. But I found out that they were not in Cherokee County, and they were not in Spartanburg County. They were in Union County. And when I got to Union County, suddenly I'm finding Hames, 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 Hames everywhere. So Charles is the first one who moved his family to Union County, South Carolina. Why that happened, I'm not sure. But he was born in 1732, and he was just a pioneer. Maybe he wanted to try something new. We don't, there's a lot of reasons why people moved. And we just don't know a lot of that reason. But it's interesting that he is the first one. His son William served in the Revolutionary War. Now when I found that on fold 3, if you're interested in any of the family that's interested in checking out a lot of this stuff, and maybe your in-laws, because the Hames, there's only a couple of Hames that were in the Revolutionary War, but fold 3 has the Revolutionary War, and I believe War of 1812. I'm not sure, but some of them are free. Most of them you have to pay to access, but there are some that they have made free because people voluntarily did the research and voluntarily paid to have it done for the public. So if you go to fold 3, there are some of these records that are free to look at. If you're into military, it's about $69 a year. So really you can do it for a year and get everything you want from there. But anyway, William was there, and I have a copy of those records, and maybe when I can do more this type of research, I will actually show copies of it. But the interesting thing is, in that record, and then what they do is everything that was used for the widow to get help, and Elizabeth Mosley was the widow, everything that they had to prove that they were married, they had to prove that the person was dead, they had to bring living witnesses, if at all possible, to prove their marriage. Well, she ended up bringing family members, but she also had, and they have a picture of it, a copy of it in this file. She sent part of her Bible, the Hames Bible, or the Mosley, it could have been a Mosley Bible since she was a Mosley, but she sent a part of it with their marriage date and witnesses in it. That is just too amazing to me. Their son Mark gets a lot closer to us. He was in the War of 1812. He was in the Means 1st Regiment South Carolina Militia. Now, Michael Gaffney was in the Means 1st Regiment South Carolina Militia. In fact, Michael Gaffney was a captain. So they actually served together. I don't know how well they knew each other, and I really, unless you study these wars, and some of you guys may have studied all of where they were and where they served and so forth. I don't know, but I'm wondering if they actually knew each other. I mean, if he was a captain, Mark might have well served with him. But it's interesting that their grandchildren married each other. Mark's grandson, John Thomas, Pop's daddy, married Michael's granddaughter, Clara. So that's interesting. Now we get to Isaac, that is Pop's grandfather. And I really wanted to spend some time with him because I've done quite a bit of study on him. Mary Ann has done some study on them and their life. And there is a huge amount of information available on this generation. He was born in 1830 in Union County, and he died in the Civil War, but he died of disease, not of any attack or being wounded in that case. He was young, and his because in 1860 he was 29, so he was very young when he joined the Civil War. And at that, in 1860, he only had the 2 children, John and an infant. And then before he went to serve, he had the 3rd child. So there was 3 babies. 3 babies. And he went to serve. And they owned land. He owned land. It sounds like he had a farm, or at least because in his state records there's cattle and stuff and tobacco. So it sounds like he had a small farm. So he had a means. Well, when he died, he must have died intestate. He did not have a will. And unfortunately, in this time frame, if you did not have a will, or I don't even know, sometimes if it even mattered if you had a will or not, they sold everything. And they paid the debt, and then they gave the widow what was left. So she is with 3 very young children, 1 an infant, absolute infant, 3 very young children, and he's dead. And she has to try to prove some proof of it. And it just gets worse. This part, now the reason it's so fascinating to me is that's only, so that's great-grandfather. Pop was our grandfather, great-great-grandfather. It's our great-great-grandfather. This only 3 generations, 4 generations back. And to have this much tragedy in this family. And there is a lot of information. So if you're looking for more information, you can find a lot more about this. When he died, I kept, in the world we live in today, if somebody dies, a lot of times somebody would take him in the family. And I could not figure out, when I started researching this, why didn't his mother and father or somebody take her and the children in? This is a very young woman with 3 babies. And when I got to the probate records, I found out why. Mark died the same year. So here is Mark's mother in the same boat as Martha. They sold all of Mark's land, and she still had children at home. And she's left having to find some place to live too. So she had no home to offer to Martha. she had no place because she sold everything too. And those two probates, oh man. Probate, and I'm going to share some of it. That's the reason I'm taking the time with this. Probate records at this time were so sad. I mean, they're sad now, but they were really sad then. So then I started looking at her brother, George Washington, how does that? William George Washington Going. I love his name. He was her brother, but he became the guardian. Now, in that time frame, by law, in South Carolina, a widow had to have a guardian handle the money. Now, there are cases, in fact, one of the Gaffneys, the woman is actually a co-guardian to her own children. But in this case, her brother is a guardian. Now, I wondered, and this is speculation, totally my own speculation, if maybe because she was so distraught, having to deal with 3 babies, having to sell everything, that she could not make the decisions on her own. I really don't know, but it was, you can imagine being a young woman and losing everything. Now, I said, well, why didn't he take her in? I mean, he's the guardian. Why didn't he just take her to his house? He had 12 children. 12 children at home. And I mean, we're not talking mansions. You know, the Hames weren't millionaires. He probably had a farm, but 12 children, and he's going to add a woman and 3 more children? I just don't think there was room. I don't know that for a fact, but I just don't think there was room. So they ended up in a boarding house, and I found in the probate records where he had, if he bought a pair of socks there was a cute little thing where he bought socks and he bought underwear or something for the children, and he had to record it. It's in the probate records. Everything dime he spent of Isaac's estate to take care of the family, every little bit of it is there. So things are going along. They're living in a boarding house, and William George Washington, they call him WGW, he is paying her everything, and then she dies. 1867, Mama's dead. So now there's 3 very young children with no mother or father. And Marianne has told me, Marianne Hames, McIntyre, told me that someone there thinks she was murdered. We can't find evidence of that, no proof of it, but what a horrible thing to add to their tragedy. At this time, William did take the children into his home. Now, I don't know if some of his children were old enough to leave by that time, or they just said, we've got to do something, and they took him. They were no longer living in a boarding house. They're too young to live by themselves. Now, this is Isaac Hames' Civil War records. And he was a private. He was in the Company H, 5th Carolina Infantry. And there are a lot of Hameses that were in that same infantry. A lot of them. And we see in these records, this is 1862. This is the year he died. And it says that he was absent. He was in Columbia, South. He was supposed to sign in. He was supposed to muster. And he was in the hospital sick. See, it says it's sick. And then it says on the second one, he died. And then these are the letters. And this was interesting. We see this. I think I got his name is here somewhere, maybe. Well, we see Martha. But this is the letter stating he died. And it's from the Confederate office stating how he died and where he died and the proof that he died. This is dated, this one here is dated May 1863. So they're finally saying he's dead. And then also the Treasury Department, they're releasing him. He died, you know, they're saying his name not on the roll. He died. He was absent and he died. And then at the bottom one says he died. And then, of course, the rest of it. This starts as estate papers. Now, the estate papers, there's several pages I did not include. And we see here this William G.W. Going is the guardian and the administrator of the state. And if you want copies of this, I can get you copies of this. And they had to go before the magistrate. They had to go and prove, you know, he had to declare it, probate it, and then this is the package paper. This is what will break your heart. At least it does mine. They had to sell everything. Look at this first one here. A small pot. Potatoes. And something, I'm not even sure what that says. Choice sheets. Sheet, I think it says 5 chairs. A heifer cow. A calf. And they're selling everything they own. I mean, you get over here, they've got towels, they've got pillow slips, counterpanes, which are, I think they're like fancy blankets or something. Another quilt. They're selling everything this woman owns. And then on this one just bed and furniture to couture. And it looks to me, when I'm reading this one, it looks to me like they appraise it at $50 and let them keep these beds. I'm really not sure. And it looks like they let them keep the clothing. See, a lot of bed clothing, and wearing apparel. It looks like, because it says bed and furniture to, not taken away from. Mary Louise Hames, to John Thomas Hames. Something, and mattress and furniture and a gun. So John Thomas got Daddy's gun by the looks of it. And it looks like they were allowed to keep that. That's it. Think about that. And then it also tells who bought everything. And I think that's interesting. Her loom, her spinning. I mean, tools, everything. Coffee mill, baskets. Everything sold. Everything sold. Everything. Just think about this. It does tell who sold it. Spade, hose, baskets, hammer, everything sold. Now, John Thomas was the son, and then the 2 girls, he was the oldest, and then the girls were younger. And he was born in 1858. So he was 2 years old. He was 4 years old when his father died. Now think about that. And his 2 younger sisters below that. He lived, now when his mother died in 1867, he went to live with his uncle. And he lived there until about 1878. Now, I found the 3 children in the 1880 census. Before I knew all this information, I was looking for them. The 2 girls were living with Couture. They were living with a different Hames cousin in northern, above Cherokee, which is why I think they ended up living there as adults. And he was living with Marion and Rebecca Hames Amos. Well, Rebecca was a Hames. And he was living there working on their farm. The 2 girls were listed in the 1880 census as farm workers, nieces and farm workers. And he was sent there. Now, when we were in Gaffney in our little trip, we found out that he had an illegitimate child. We met the descendant of that of Mary Quinn. And the thing of it is, he was single. So we're not sure why they didn't marry, whether William G.W. said no, whether her parents said no, whether, there is a mystery as to why. They were both single. They could have married. We don't know why. But suddenly he disappears from William G.W. Goins' home, and he is sent away to Rebecca Hames Amos and Marion Amos's home. And the 2 girls are also sent away. I don't know what was going on in the going home, but all 3 of them were sent away. And we'll probably never know, and that's okay. But that's interesting. So we have cousins that or direct line cousins that we finally got to meet. Now, I wanted to play around with these. If you ever get to look up these newspaper articles. There are free places online where you can actually look up these old ones. A lot of them I got from newspapers.com, which is a paid site. And he moved to, he's living with the Amoses, and he meets Clara Catherine Gaffney. And that's Michael Gaffney's granddaughter. They got married in 1885. So not long after that 1880 census, he was living with the Amoses. And I believe they lived fairly close to each other. I'm really not sure. I can't prove that, but I really think they did. And then they had these children. They had William Edward, Carrie Lee, Thomas Lafayette, Fanny Elizabeth, John Freeman, Winters, and Leo. The 2 little girls died, and they are buried there in Gaffney. The rest of them all came to Florida with them. We've seen the graves. In fact, some of the family has replaced the graves to new markers that are easier to read. And also, Mary Ann and family, I think Mama helped pay for it. They bought a headstone for Isaac because he died in Virginia during the Civil War, and nobody knows where he was buried. I believe there is a graveyard stated where they buried the people that died in there near that hospital, but they're not marked. So I don't know how you would ever prove where he is. Anyway, back to this. So they're living in Gaffney, and John is a carpenter. Well, when I found that out, I started playing around and looking at these newspapers and started trying to gather as many things that he built to see if I could count how many, and I honestly have not got that. If one of you guys want to do that, I think it'd be a fun project to find out how many homes that John and then the boys, when they got older, Ed and Pop did most of it. Uncle Tom helped. I don't think Winters did, and Leo did not, but I think the other ones did. In fact, Pop did plumbing later, so they did a lot of building. So these are just some newspaper articles from the Gaffney area, and these were before 1905 because they moved in 1905 to Florida. So it's interesting. I just have a few of these. I love it. We spent Monday night at our young friend, Mr. Ed Hames, and he worked on the Ledger, which was the name of the newspaper. It was the Gaffney Ledger was where that article came from. And he worked there in 1903, 4, 5 in that time frame. In fact, I think he worked there. He did not move with the rest of the family. He actually stayed there quite a few years before he moved here. And we enjoyed it. And the interesting thing now, he never married, but yet in all of these articles about him, he's always with the girls. So I'm really not sure why he never married. But anyway, and then we see John T. Hames went to Prosperity Tuesday. He's working on the Baker building. And then this last, the bottom one, is so interesting because now I thought they said they went to Arkansas. That says Oklahoma. I thought the stories we had, and unfortunately our story man just passed away. And so we won't be able to prove it by him. He's gone. But John T. says he went to Oklahoma. Now, the story that I've heard from all of the brothers and Mary Ann, different ones, is that it did not work out. What they got when they got there was not what they were told. And on the train, someone told them about Bellevue, Florida. And that's how they ended up here. And then we have more news. This is 1908. Mrs. Hames has been sick. She went to Ocala. John T. Hames and Sons, see Tom and Ed here in 1908, building a house, barn, corn crib for Professor Green at his farm 5 miles west. See, these things, if we just knew where these were, some of them may still be there. Mr. J.T. Hames is absent from town this week doing some building for Professor Green, so it's the same guy. Application of, now this one was interesting on the bottom left there, application of John T. Hames of Bellevue for reduction and redemption of lots 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, Block 2 Bellevue was granted, and the comptroller recommended to allow the redemption for the face value of certificates omitting years of taxes without interest. So they had moved there in 1905, but apparently the taxation thing got caught up. But anyway, he was allowed a reduction in redemption, and he was allowed to have that land. And then we see he is finishing Mr. Tremere's house. Now, if you read any of the articles in the Bellevue newspaper from this time frame, the Tremere's girls were in they were a newspaper recorder, and Grandma was a newspaper recorder from that newspaper, and that was really interesting to me. So go to 1909. He's working. Let's see. I think that's just giving trips, the mayors and so forth there. The following persons have visited the Brick City, which is hysterical the way they do that. The annual meeting of the Bellevue workers, and they elected Mrs. J.T. Hames as a work directress. And then, and this is interesting, Grandma Hames, which is Clara, really, really missed Gaffney. And she was there all the time. In fact, unfortunately, she was there when he died. When he was hit by a car, she was in Gaffney. And now we see that O.M. Gale is building a college on Smith Lake. Well, we remember Smith Lake when we were kids. And J.T. and Thomas are the carpenters. And then J.T. is working in a mill on E.E. Converse in Ocala. And J.T. Hames is working for Dr. Henry in Lackawanna. So he did a lot of buildings there in Bellevue. Now these articles, I just kind of have a mixture. This is when they were leaving in 1905, and they were in 1903, and they were selling their property. And then we see some more here that they were building. And then in 1910, suddenly the boys are old enough to really start getting their name in the paper. I just love these articles. There was a party, and the guests were all there, and our Hameses were right there in the midst of it. Ed and Freeman Hames are there in this party. And then John he was sick in 1912, and he spent time with his family. Tom Hames left, and this is now 1912. Tom Hames left Monday for Lowell, where he'll build a mill building for Mr. Robert Polly of Ocala. So Tom went out on his own. Leo turned 16. He's the one that got electrocuted very young. Freeman and Winters are in the county fair. This is all in that early 1912, 1914, right in that time frame. Snickle, this one was so funny. The Tremeres, there are several articles about Snicklefoot. Snicklefoot was in all kind of stuff. That's a hound, the Tremeres hound dog. And then at the end of this, it says, we understand that Mrs. John T. Hames' fine white bulldog also got a dose of this poison. And then we see that the Hameses enlarged and beautified his home by adding a very commodious porch. I love that. And Freeman Hames turned stonemason, and with artistic care built stone upon stone into the wall that will last as well to adorn the house. See, this is really interesting. And then he went and left to build a sawmill. All of these articles tell all the things they were building. 1914, he's back home. John Hames and son were doing repair work for the Carneys. Mayor John T. Hames came up from Winter Haven last Saturday to see. He was working down there for a period of time. There's other articles. And then they were working on a packing house. And then I love this bottom one here on the right. A startling innovation, and the first one of its kind ever held in Bellevue, was a proclamation of Mayor John T. Hames calling for a street cleaning day and designating Thursday, October 8th as the time. About 50 public spirited citizens turned out and worked dutifully all. I love that. He was the first one to ever say that. I love it. Now this last slide was just some of the pictures of the boys, and I didn't have a picture of Winters by himself, but that's okay. Eleanor's beautiful and they're together. I love our Hames family, and I enjoy it. I enjoy studying them. If you like this and you enjoy this, let me know, and I will actually do more of this type of genealogy stuff. Alrighty, talk to y'all later. Love you, bye.